Can't trust your AI results? Let Borium sift through 107.
Chapter 3. The Activities of the Prestigious Classics Club. Now that I think about it, what does the Classics Club do anyway? The only students that do know what it does are no longer with the school, and I couldn't be bothered to ask the teachers about it. I could ask my sister about it, but unfortunately she's in Beirut. Still, while it's rare to have a club that does not know what it does, there are plenty of clubs whose existence can only be classified as a mystery, so it's not something worth fretting about. It has been a month since the resurrection of the Classics Club. The club room, the geology room, was no longer a private space, but it was still a relaxing spot. It was a place where I could kill some time after school whenever I'm feeling bored. Satoshi might be inside, or Chitanda might be inside, or both of them might be inside. Or not. It doesn't really matter either way. We could choose to converse, or we could also choose to keep quiet. Satoshi was the sort that could calmly endure silence to begin with, while Our Lady Chitanda was the sort of graceful lady befitting of her image, as long as she doesn't let her curiosity explode. Therefore, while unintentional, this club appears more like a leisure club than a school club. Thus I do not get wary even amidst their company, since I was never apprehensive of other people to begin with, though Satoshi does sometimes mistake that I am. Today was a drizzly day, and I was inside with Chitanda. I was leaning back on a chair by the window, reading a cheap paperback while Chitanda sat in front of the room reading a thick book for some reason. One would say this was a sluggish afternoon after school. Looking at the clock, I noticed only 30 minutes had passed. The time that was spent unconsciously was still short. Although you could say I was feeling quite relaxed, that isn't exactly correct. Rather, it was because I was feeling nervous and stressful that I had to enter into a state of relaxation. I'm really just consciously trying to extend my energy-saving mode for as long as possible, that's all. The silence was only broken by the sound of pages turning and the raindrops outside. I'm getting sleepy now. I think I'll go home as soon as the rain stops. The sound of a book closing was heard as Chitanda, who sat in front with her back facing towards me, sighed and said, "How barren." While she wasn't looking at me, it was clear she was speaking to me rather than to herself, though I had no idea how to respond to her sudden comment. Anyway, I'll try asking. "What, the crops in your family farmland?" "Those have 2 crops," Chitanda answered as though reading it out and turned around. "And they're semi-annual, so it's hardly barren." As expected of a lady of a farmland owner. "No, there's no need to praise me." The sound of the rain, followed by silence. "No, that's not what I was saying." "You were saying something about barren." "Yes, that. It's barren." "What is?" Chitanda looked firmly at me and then raised her right arm as though showing the whole room. "All this time spent after lessons. We don't seem to have any purpose or do anything productive at all." Of course, this was merely a way to kill time, not to produce anything. I closed my paperback and looked up towards her. "Well, I'm all ears. Is there something you want the Classics Club to do?" "Me?" It was kind of a mean question, as not many people are aware of what they themselves would want to do when asked directly. By the way, I'm at least aware that I desire nothing. However, Chitanda replied without hesitation. "Yes, there is." That's surprising. To answer yes right away. As I was about to ask what was it she was interested in doing, she explained. "Though that's for personal reasons." In that case, there was no need to ask further. Chitanda then continued. "But we're talking about the Classics Club, So we should be doing something club-related. We can't just sit around and do nothing. Very well, but we aren't even sure what the club's purpose is. No, there is a purpose. Whether she's speaking with the authority of a club president or the aura of a prestigious clan member, Chitanda declared, "We will publish an essay anthology this October in the Cultural Festival." The Cultural Festival? I had visited the Kamiyama High Cultural Festival before, so I was familiar with it. To put it briefly, it was the essence of youth culture around this area. And according to Satoshi, the Kami High Cultural Festival's Nodate tea ceremony is highly recommended for anyone interested in learning the art, while its breakdancing contest is a hotbed for future professionals. Quite a number of arts-related clubs of various qualities would participate. During her 3 years in high school, I remember seeing my sister carrying a boxload of essay anthologies to school. So to speak, that was the crystallization of the rose-colored high school life. As to how I feel about all this, I guess it's better for me not to say anything about it. Let's just say that I hardly felt anything at all, not even once. However, an essay anthology, huh? I gave some thought to Chitanda's proposal and asked a question. Yet Chitanda was steadfast with the proposal. No, it has to be an anthology. If you really want to publish something, we can set up an exhibition booth or something like that. Kami High's Cultural Festival traditionally forbids exhibition booths, so no, it has to be an anthology. Why? Our club budget specifically refers to anthology publication. It would be troublesome if we don't publish one. Chitanda took out a piece of neatly folded paper from her chest pocket and showed it to me. Indeed, for this year's Classics Club annual budget, the tiny amount of money that was allocated was specifically set for the purpose of anthology publication. Even so, Oide-sensei has requested that we publish it, as it's become a tradition for over 30 years for the Classics Club to publish an anthology each year, and he was not going to watch it come to an end. As a rule of thumb, reasonable people tend to be smart. Yet it doesn't mean unreasonable people are dumb. Chitanda was definitely not dumb, yet she was clearly being unreasonable. To begin with, she appealed to the sentimental side rather than the financial side, and decided the club's activity based on tradition. Still, I realized it was inefficient to try to argue against something done in the name of tradition, so I smiled bitterly and relented. Okay, we'll publish an anthology. And so end unceremoniously my purposeless carefree days. At least I'm still in good health, I guess. The rain is still falling outside. Since it's still not time to go home yet, I decided to ask. So, how are you going to publish this anthology? How? What do you mean? What kind of essays we're reading every year? While it's not likely, I was already resigned to writing academic-like essays along the titles of Review of the 8 Dog Chronicles, Tales of Moonlight and Rain, with regards to the Emperor's role in Shiramine, or The Great Mirror, concerning observations of social changes in the novel, as well as counter-arguments to last year's essay. Just to be safe, I should include an appendix as well. Though I was prepared to accept that I would probably not produce anything up to the standards of past essays. At any rate, as to just what kind of format this so-called tradition adopts for its essays, I have no idea. However, the answer I received was in the negative. I'm not sure. I wonder what we should write. It was to be expected. As she was president, it was easy to forget that she too was only in the club for about a month or so. I'm sure we could find out if we can find the back issues. They should be around. You know where they are? In the club room? I see. I suddenly feel pathetic for going along with her pace. I promptly pointed my finger towards the floor for her to see. Oh, this is the club room. Exactly. Though it hardly feels like a club room. She's right though. This geology room had nothing else inside it besides standard teaching equipment. All we could see were a blackboard, tables and chairs, as well as cleaning equipment. A typical looking classroom, all in all. There didn't seem to be anywhere books could be stored. The back issues don't seem to be stored here. So it seems. Well then, without waiting for my reply, she opened the door and walked out. She's quite proactive for my reply. She opened the door and walked out. She's quite proactive for an elegant lady. Oh well, the library is just along the path to the school entrance, which is today's Friday, which means today's librarian on duty is... Well, if it isn't Oreki. It's been a while, though I've hardly missed you. Upon entering the library, I was instantly greeted with sarcasm. As expected, the person sitting behind the counter was none other than Ibara Mayaka. Ibara and I go back a long way, as we've been in the same class for 9 years since primary school. Her baby face features have been in place since childhood, and have only grown up a bit after becoming a high school student. You may find her childlike features and short stature cute, but do not be fooled by her appearance, for she carries a hidden weapon with her at all times. If you let your guard down, you would be greeted with a colorful blend of sarcastic wit. I was even told to stay away from her based on stories of guys who were fooled by her pretty looks, only to be sunk instantly. Not to mention, as a result of her never admitting to her mistakes, most people would mistake her for being a callous person, though I personally don't really believe such assessments of her. I made the most unpleasant expression I could make and replied, "Hey, I came just to see you. This is a sacred ground for cultivation. It's not made for the likes of you to visit." Ibarra sat cross-legged on her chair behind the counter. Since all a librarian ever does is to handle the lending and borrowing of books from the library, there doesn't seem to be much else for her to do. While one of her main responsibilities was to take the box containing the return books back to their respective shelves, the return box was still filled with a whole pile of books. Ibarra was not the type to slack off, so she's probably attempting to do them all in one go. In her hand was a large book, which she was no doubt reading to kill time. The library was quite crowded at this time. There were about 10 four-person tables, and each of them was occupied by 1 or 2 students reading. There were probably people who were indeed reading for leisure, though I'd also understand if there were people killing time while waiting for the rain to stop. I then noticed one of the boys looking up at us. I recognized him at once, since it's Fukube Satoshi of all people. Satoshi met my gaze and stood up with his usual smile. "Hey, Hotaro, didn't expect to see you here." Ibara looked at us with a sullen face and said, "Still good buddies as ever, aren't you? As expected from the best couple of Kaburaya Junior High." I knew it was pointless to argue back at her, but still I said, "Oh, shut up." Ibara merely replied flatly, "My, you're quite a crybaby for a gloomy person." "A crybaby, huh?" She then turned towards Satoshi with a composed expression. "Fuka-chan, you know how my feelings are, so you should know I was joking, right?" Don't worry about that, Mayaka. No offense taken." "What? You're just gonna let her use joking as an excuse to let her off the hook again?" Satoshi glared at me and then turned his gaze away. I smiled bitterly, as I knew Ibara has been pursuing him for some time. I have no idea when she started doing so, though Satoshi has been dodging her advances ever since. Satoshi pretended to cough in an attempt to change the subject. "Anyway, what business does the Classics Club have in the library?" Yes. I didn't come to the library just to see Ibara. I urged Titamba to say something. As though suffering from stage fright, Our Lady said nervously to Ibara, Hi there. May I inquire something of you?" "Sure. How may I help you?" "I'd like to ask if there are any essay anthologies here in the library." "Yup, they're at those shelves right over there." Do they have those for the Classics Club? Ibarra tilted her head and wondered. The Classics Club? I'm sorry, I don't think I'm sure of that. Should I look for them for you? Just as Chitanda was about to express her gratitude, Satoshi stopped her. You won't find any. I've occasionally looked up on the shelves, so I should know. Maika, where else could they be found if they're not on the shelves? If they're not on the open shelves, then they must be in the archives. The archives, huh? Satoshi thought for a while before asking. Chitanda-san, why are you looking for S anthologies anyway? We're going to publish one for the cultural festival, so we were wondering if we can have a look at the back issues for reference. Oh, so they're for the Kanya festival, huh? Didn't know you were knowledgeable on such stuff, Hotaro. Knowledgeable? Rather, I was obliged to work on it. Besides, Chitanda probably doesn't even need me to be knowledgeable. Wait, what festival again? Satoshi, what did you just call the cultural festival? The Kanya festival. Haven't you heard of it before? It's the nickname for the Kami-High Cultural Festival. A nickname, huh? Something like the Sophia Festival for Sophia University, or the Mita Festival for Keio University. Then again, like the story about the 4 exponential clans, I find it hard to believe. Sounds suspicious. Is that true? Of course it's true, though it's an unofficial nickname. I heard all my seniors in the handicraft club call it the Kanya Festival. Is it the same in the Manga Studies Club, Mayaka? So Ibarra's in the Manga Studies Club, huh? While it does suit her image, it feels unbecoming of her. Yup, everyone there calls it the Kanya Festival. Even the festival committee calls it that. Kanya? How do you spell that in kanji? Satoshi placed his hand on his chin and said, Don't know. Everybody just calls it that. It seems like it's true that Kanya Festival is a nickname. However, I just couldn't think of any word that matches with the spelling of Kanya. Oh well, seeking out the etymology of such a silly name is probably a profession in itself. As I was thinking of that, Satoshi added, perhaps it's abbreviated from Kamiyama, turning it into Kanyama, and in turn evolving into Kanya. As expected for an expert of trivial knowledge. As we were going off topic, Ibarra firmly pulled us back. Anyhow, anthologies, is it? We'll probably find them if we look up the archives, though the head librarian's in the meeting right now, so we can't go in without her permission. She'll probably be back in half an hour. You wanna wait? Half an hour, huh? Not even Chitanda was in a hurry to want to see them at once, so she looked at me and whispered, What do we do now? I was fine with whatever decision, but I noticed it's still raining heavily outside. The weather report did say the rain will stop sometime in the afternoon and we'd have a starry night tonight, but as the rain showed no signs of stopping right now, we had no choice but to wait. Guess we'll wait. Even though you could go back? I decided to return to my paperback novel and resume at the page where I was reading. Satoshi tugged at Ibarra's sleeve and said, Mayaka, why don't you tell Hotaro about the story you were telling me earlier? Ibarra lifted her eyebrows and thought for a while before nodding. Okay, Oreki, do you ever feel like exercising your brain once in a while? Nope, but neither has Ibarra. What story are you talking about? Satoshi answered Chitanda's question with his usual smile on his face. The one about the popular book which no one ever reads. As you know, my shift is every Friday after school, and I've discovered lately that the same book has been returned during this time every week. This is the 5th week in a row now. Don't you find it strange? Ibarra began to speak while I was busy looking for a desk where I could sit down and read my book. Unfortunately, there just weren't any available seats in such a crowded place, so I had no choice but to sit on top of the table that Satoshi occupied. As the table was close to the counter, we could hear Chitanda and Ibarra's voice from here. Is it a popular book? Does this look like one? Ibarra showed us the thick book she was holding. Oh, such a beautiful book. Chitana gasped in awe and then turned her gaze towards me. Our lady's delighted expression was as though I'd just bought a splendidly bound book for her. The book was bound in a leather cover decorated with finely detailed patterns. Its darkish blue color emitted an aura of solemnity about it. The title of the book was Kamiyama High School Walking Together for 50 Years. Besides being thick, it was also quite a large book in its length and width. May I have a look inside? Sure. Upon taking out my paperback novel from my shoulder bag, I started searching for the page where I last read. Yet my vision of the novel was quickly replaced by that of high-quality pages. It was Chitanda, who upon opening the aforementioned book, Kamiyama High School Walking Together for 50 Years, placed it on top of my novel in order to show it to me. While I wasn't exactly interested, I didn't ignore it either, and had a quick look at its contents. It's got nothing else on it besides a description of a school's history and goes as such. School Archery Club in the Prefectural Newcomers Tournament. July 1st, cancellation of first-year field trip due to typhoon. October 10th, 14th, Cultural Festival. October 30th, Sports Festival. November 16th, 19th, second year field trip, Sasebo, Nagasaki. January 23rd, 24th, first year skiing course. February 2nd, memorial service for first year student Oide Naoto who died in a car accident. It was full of such details. It would take a particular set of skills to actually read through all that. I wouldn't go so far as to borrow the book once a week in order to read it all, but I wouldn't be surprised if someone actually did that just for its contents. Hotaro, you were just thinking, I wouldn't be surprised if someone actually borrowed that once a week, weren't you? Stop reading my mind, you dumb telepath. Seeing as that I didn't rebuke her, Ibara puffed her particularly small chest and said, It's not that simple. You rarely come here to borrow books, so you wouldn't know. Listen carefully. The longest period one can borrow a book is 2 weeks. So there is no need for someone to borrow a book and return it just a week later. And yet this book was returned here every week. I see. There is indeed a strange occurrence. Is there any way to find out who has borrowed that book? Of course, there's a list detailing the borrowing records behind the cover. Have a look. Chitanda promptly turned to the cover and saw the list. Huh? She gasped. What's wrong? The list contained the names of the borrowers as well as the dates that they had borrowed the book. We could indeed tell that they had borrowed the book once every week. But that was not the reason, Chitanda had gasped, as her fingers pointed out the list of names to me. The borrower this week was Machida Kyoko of Class 2D. Last week, it was Sawakiguchi Misaki of Class 2F. 2 weeks ago, Yamaguchi Ryoko, Class 2E. 3 weeks ago, Shima Saori, Class 2E. And 4 weeks ago, Suzuki Yoshie, Class 2D. In other words, it's borrowed by a different person every week. That's not all. Chitanda showed me the dates. As I looked carefully, the latest date was today, and the previous borrowed date was exactly 7 days ago. The book was lent out on Fridays. Exactly. The book was borrowed and returned on the same day. This Machida Kyoko borrowed the book earlier today, only to return it later. It's the same for the other borrowers for 5 consecutive weeks. We can also tell the times that they had borrowed the book. It was always during lunchtime on a Friday. To borrow a book during lunchtime and then return it after school, where would they even find the time to read it? So, you curious? Upon returning the book to Ibara, Chitanda nodded her head gently. Yes, I'm very curious. She spoke in a firmer tone than usual. Much like last time, her pupils looked as though they had gone larger, revealing a strong interest within them. Why is it? Thanks to Ibara's mystery, Our Lady's flame of curiosity had been ignited. Satoshi was no use as a water source to douse this fire, as it probably played dumb and say, I wouldn't know anything about it. I decided to return to reading my novel. But I was naive, for I never expected the spear to be pointed right at me. Once again, Chitanda placed the thick book Kamiyama High School Walking Together for 50 Years on top of my novel and said, "So, what do you think, Oreki-san?" Me?" Rather than his usual gentle smile, Satoshi was now smiling teasingly at me. I instantly realized what had happened. He had succeeded in ensnaring me in his trap. Curse him and his evil plans. "Let's think about this together. Shall we, Oreki-san?" Why? Why me? Well, I was fine with Chitanda's vigorous curiosity, and while I might admit that Satoshi may have some positive qualities about him, even if it's as a joke, why should I be obliged to play his games and put up with her? Still, it was true that things have developed to a point where talking my way out of it would have been bothersome. So I had no choice but to reply as such. "Yeah, I guess it is interesting. I think about it." Ibara stood beside Satoshi and asked, "Fuku-chan, is Oreki actually smart?" "Not at all. He's usually not reliable, but occasionally he can be up to the task." "Why are you getting all cheeky?" And so I began to think. For a book to be borrowed and returned on the same day for 5 consecutive weeks by completely different people, the possibility of a coincidence could not be ruled out, but I wasn't going to believe that it was all due to some god of coincidence. Besides, Chitanda wouldn't have accepted that as an explanation. Getting her to accept things was more important than the truth. So, throwing out the theory that it was a coincidence was a no-brainer. It was also clear that the book was not borrowed for the purpose of reading it, as there wouldn't be time to read it between it being borrowed during lunchtime and it being returned after lessons. If you think about it, it would have been more logical for one to either take it home to read or just read the book in the library after school. For the latter case, there would have been no need to borrow the book out of the library at all. Thus, this book was not borrowed for its original intended purpose. So, if the book was not borrowed to be read, then what was it being borrowed for? Chitanda answered, "It's heavy, so maybe it's used to compress pickled vegetables?" Satoshi answered, "Maybe it's used as a shield or something." Ibara answered, "It's thick, so it's probably used as a pillow." I should never have asked you guys. I decided to switch the focus. Why was the book being borrowed by a different person every week? Besides being a coincidence, which was already ruled out, there were 2 points for consideration. First, the girls don't seem to have anything in common, though it's clear that they were using it during Friday afternoons for some sort of ritual and took turns to borrow it. As to what ritual, maybe fortune-telling? Something like, "Your lucky item this month is school history. If you borrow it every Friday afternoon and returning on the same day, you shall meet the man of your dreams." Nah, that sounds too silly. That leaves the second point, that the girls do have something in common. A look at their names revealed that they're clearly all girls, but just that alone is not enough to establish a common trait. Within Kamihai, if 5 people were randomly picked, there was a high possibility that they could all be girls, but it was already common for people of the same gender to gather together in a co-ed environment anyway. Their other common trait would be that they're all second years, but their classes are different. Now that I think about it... What is it? Did you think of something? I may have thought of something, but my thoughts were blown apart by Satoshi's interruption. Now, where was I? Anyway, I'll start from where my thoughts first started to connect. There must be a sign of something. For example, maybe they were secretly communicating with each other, where returning the book facing upwards meant yes and facing downwards meant no. What were they communicating for? It's just an example. Anything could do. Chitanda began to tilt her head and started thinking. Yes, that's it. You just slowly digest all this. Though the one who rebutted me wasn't Chitanda, it It was Ibarra. That would be impossible. Look. Ibarra pointed to the return box. There were loads of books stocked up inside. I see. There was no way of telling whether that book was returned facing upwards or downwards. The only person who would know which way the book was facing would be the one opening the box, and that would be the librarian on duty. Darren. Any careless ideas would end up as easy prey for Ibarra to shoot down. I couldn't think of anything. They might have a spare key to open the box, but I have no way of knowing. Now, if only there was some hint. I looked at the well-decorated bound hardback in Ibarra's hands and wondered where I could find any declaration of surrender within the book. This was when Chitana suddenly entered into my vision. She stretched her body over the counter and just stared at the book that Ibarra was holding tightly in front of a chest. Eh? Eh? Ibarra was dumbstruck at such a reaction. I knew how she felt. What is it, Chitanda? Did you find some hidden symbols on the cover or something? Chitanda remained motionless and said, This book, it seems to have some sort of scent, she muttered. Really? Ibarra, can I borrow that? I don't smell anything. No, I'm sure of it. The book itself wouldn't have any odor. Perhaps it's the ink or that of the library? Chitana shook her head at Satoshi's suggestion. Both Ibarra and Satoshi also took turns to smell the book, but couldn't detect any scent, and both raised their eyebrows and tilted their heads in puzzlement. I can't really tell what the scent was, but it was strong, like paint thinner. Stop saying something so dangerous. It was? I couldn't really tell. Neither could I, but I had a feeling that Chitana was right. Our lady had been adamant about it after all, and I never would have thought that she would say it was paint thinner. If we assume that it is, then, I may be getting into something here. But it's bothersome to explain it all. As I was wondering what to do next, Satoshi had already read my thoughts and said, Hotaro, your face tells me you figured something out. Oreki actually has? Noticing Ibarra turning towards me looking completely skeptical, I nodded and replied honestly. Sort of. While I'm not entirely sure, Chitanda, do you feel like getting some exercise? I'd like you to go somewhere for me. Chitanda was probably the sort who would dash out at once upon telling her where to go, but Satoshi stopped her with smiling. Don't be fooled by him, Chitanda-san. You don't want to end up doing errands for Hotaro now, do you? Or you'll end up doing exactly what he wants. So, where is it you were thinking of? How reprehensible. Satoshi does tend to say too much wherever Ibarra's around. Still, as he wasn't exactly off the mark, I was hardly displeased. It was true that I wouldn't get things done if I don't have someone else to do it for me. Very well, I'll go along as well. As we didn't have any PE lessons due to the rain, I still have some residual energy left inside me. Chitana was bound to come along as I said that. And then, guess I'll tag along too. I'll be a little shocked if Oreki actually manages to solve this. Fuku-chan, mind filling in my shift for me? Ibarra exited from the counter upon saying that. Satoshi looked dumbfounded as he replied, okay, and kept silent while walking behind the counter. It's been a while since I've sat. After being satisfied with the results we obtained, we returned to the library. How did it go? Fuku-chan, how did he manage to figure all that out? She seemed troubled as she kept muttering, How come? It's as though she sees me as a victor in a sparkling aura, though I would have not been able to sparkle without some luck. I'm truly surprised by Oreki-san. I am very curious as to what is inside his head. An image of Chitanda doing a lobotomy over my head in the basement of the Gothic mansion during a stormy night came flashing across my mind. Just imagining it gave me the chills. While I wouldn't say it out loud, Chitanda's ability to smell out such a faint scent when no one else could was a bigger mystery for me. If it's Oreki-san, then it could... Then I could what? Please, don't tell me I could be used as the ingredients of some cybernetic organism. Upon swapping places with Ibara at the counter, Satoshi asked, "So, let's hear the explanation. Hotaro, just where did you guys go?" Placing my elbows on the counter, I replied, "The arts preparation room." "The arts room? At the opposite end of the campus?" "That's why I didn't want to go myself." "What did you find here?" "Just listen." I repeated what I had explained to Chitana and Ibara previously. This book was used between the 5th and the 6th periods every Friday, probably over these 2 periods altogether. First, no girl would have any use for such a huge book during lunch break. Reading it is also out of the question. And thus, this book was used during lessons which involves different classes from the same year. My thoughts had previously come to this point before being blown off by Satoshi's interruption. It was the same reason that Chitana remembered my name after seeing me just once. And where was it that she had seen me? It must be either during PE or arts. No matter how you see it, nobody would have much use for a book during PE. Have a look at the book's cover. Something seems to be accumulated on it. Do you notice a nice hue of color? These 5 girls were using the book for the lessons, and they decided to take turns borrowing it every week. Satoshi interrupted and said, "But I don't understand. Why would they do it once a week? I mean, you could borrow up to 2... Stop saying the same stuff as Ibara. You two must really be getting along well to say the same stuff. Satoshi, would you keep a book that you have no intention of reading? It would of course be more efficient to return it to the library instead of lugging it home." "I see. And what did you show them there?" "Surely you should have guessed by now. Paintings drawn by the students of classes 2D, 2E, and 2F, who held their arts lessons together. Over there were various paintings of different styles of similar objects. There were portraits of their own classmates sitting beside a table decorated with a flower, and in each girl's hand was none other than the elegantly bound hardback Kamiyama High School walking together for 50 years. It was quite a detailed drawing, and artistically speaking it was rather bewitching." "Amazing, Hotaro. Then what was the scent that Chitana-san smelled?" "The smell of paint, of course. She figured it out as well, since the arts room was filled with painting equipment, after all." Satoshi began clapping without reservation. "Wow, that was fantastic. Thanks to you, I've managed to kill some quality time here." Chitana smiled gently in approval. "Yes, it was fun. It felt as though time has flown by quickly. I'm not sure how much time has passed to begin with, but I can't believe Oreki actually managed to solve that." While they all looked amazed, it was different for me. Ibara was the one who thought the whole thing was strange to begin with, Chitana was the one who decided to investigate out of curiosity, and Satoshi merely wanted to enjoy the ride. They were all different from me. As they were having a catharsis, I began to wonder if I would have a similar reaction by embracing the Kanya festival. How should I put this? Oh well, whatever. The rain seemed to be getting weaker. Guess it's time to go home. As I was about to pick up my shoulder bag, Chitanda stopped me. We can't go without waiting." "What, is there something else?" I noticed Satoshi and Ibara staring at me coldly. Did I do something wrong? "Oreki, just what did you come here for to begin with?" "To solve the mystery of the popular book that no one ever reads? No, wait, that's it. The anthology." Satoshi laughed. "Now, come on, guys. Hotaro will occasionally have a few screws loose." "Occasionally? Fuku-chan, you're being too kind." I've just acted stupidly in front of you two." Ibara looked as though she was about to go on when a voice came from behind the counter. "Ibara-san, thank you for the good work. You may go home now." "Ah, yes, of course. Are you leaving as well, Itoikawa-sensei?" It was a teacher, and though I'd never seen her before, I knew she was the head librarian. For a woman nearing the end of middle age, she was quite short in stature. A glance at her name tag revealed her full name, Hitoikawa Yogo. Upon the arrival of the head librarian, Satoshi immediately got down to business. Sensei, I'm Fugube Satoshi of the Classics Club. We're planning on publishing an essay anthology and would like to see the back issues for reference, but we can't seem to find them in the open shelves. So we're wondering if we may please search the archives for them. The Classics Club? Essay anthology? Itoikawa-sensei seemed surprised as she raised a voice. She probably thought that the Classics Club had been abolished or something. You're with the Classics Club? I see. I'm sorry, but the library does not hold any anthologies that I know of. Eh? Then what about the archives? There aren't any there either. Maybe something has been overlooked. I don't think that's possible. Strangely, she answered quite firmly. I see no reason for the head librarian to hide anything from us. Perhaps the archives have been overhauled recently? Upon receiving a negative answer, Satoshi had no choice but to give up. Is that so? I understand. What do we do now, Chitanda-san? This is indeed troubling. Chitanda looked at me with a depressed look. Even if you give me that look, there's nothing I can do besides shrugging my shoulders. I'm sure we'll find them eventually. Let's go home, I said, and as I picked up my shoulder bag, Ibarra said coldly, You're sure are quite laid back, looking all relaxed after solving a problem. Just because I solved a problem doesn't mean I'm all relaxed. Ibarra, your accusation is way off the mark. Though that's what my mind was saying. It was pointless to say it out loud, so I shrugged my shoulders. Yes, you're right. Let's go home. We did get something worthwhile. Chitanda said something totally incomprehensible. Anyway, our business was done here. This time, I hung my bag over my shoulder and walked out to find the rain had stopped, and rays of sunlight were shining through the clouds. As I turned and looked around, I could hear Chitanda whispering the same thing again. That's right. If it's Saraki-san, then he could... Chapter 4. The Descendants of the Eventful Classics Club. It was on a Sunday that I was invited out by Chitanda. She said she wanted to see me outside school, though she counted on me to arrange where to meet. So, as a result, here I was, waiting at the Café Pineapple Sandwich. The coffee shop, which served the sorest seasoned Kilimanjaro coffee I've ever known, was decorated on hue. The conspicuous advertising board outside was quite hard to miss. This coffee shop was quiet, as there was no radio or TV being broadcast. Though it was indeed a pleasant environment, it was quite a boring place to wait for someone. There were only a few minutes before the appointed time, so I was getting a bit fidgety about Chitanda not yet arriving, as I started my cup of coffee within the compartmentalized table I was seated at. Finally, Chitanda arrived, and according to my watch, right on time at 1:30. It's quite a small coffee shop, so she quickly found me. Dressed in a mostly white one-piece dress, she came over and got herself seated. One could say there's no other person more well-dressed than this casually dressed Chitanda. Sorry for calling you at such a short notice. It's fine, I replied as I emptied my cup of coffee and then called for the waiter. Chitanda had a look at the menu and said, I'll have a Vienna cocoa, please. She decided on something sweet. As an ordinary high school student, I wasn't wealthy enough to make another order myself. Before getting to the main agenda, we had some small talk, which started with Chitanda's favorable impression with this coffee shop. I then commented on how a person like her who doesn't order coffee in a coffee shop was like a person who visits Ueno Zoo but doesn't go to see the giant pandas, As Chitana began listing many examples of coffee which were weak in caffeine, her Vienna cocoa had arrived. I was startled to see the amount of cream in her cup. Seems like she has a sweet tooth. Chitana began to use the spoon to stir in the cream. She seemed to be enjoying herself while she was at it. At this rate, she'll just be drinking her coffee and engaging in small talk all day before going home. Being half serious and half fearful about that happening, I decided to get the ball rolling. So, what do you want? Huh? Is this the attitude you should have for asking people to take time out of their holy weekends? What is it that you asked me out for? Silently sipping her coffee and muttering, "That was delicious," Chitana tilted her head and said, "Well, it was you chose to meet at this place." "That's it, I'm going home." Please wait." Placing her spoon and cup down, Chitana quickly sat upright and said, "I'm sorry, I was a bit nervous." Though she looked as though she was calming herself down, her expression was hardly stiff to begin with. It would seem it's her nature to just blurt anything out whenever she's nervous. So I decided to tease her by asking, "Nervous? You have something to confess to me?" Upon saying that, I quickly noticed that such a generic joke had a subtle effect on her. "No, As though trying to conceal her embarrassment, she looked hesitant as she slowly nodded. I started to panic and quickly called for the waiter. "I'd like another coffee, please." Not minding my reaction, Chitana silently spoke. "While it might be a confession, it's more of a request I have for you. So I don't know if I'm justified to make such a request. So, would you please hear my story first?" Chitana was no longer staring at her cup of cocoa. "Is that so?" Though I'm no good with such solemnness, I replied, "Okay, let's hear it." "Thank you." And so, after taking a gulp, Chitana began to slowly speak. "I have an uncle. He was my mother's older brother. His name was Sekitani Chun. 10 years ago, he went on a voyage to Malaysia, but he has been missing since 7 years ago. When I was young, no, I'm probably still young right now. 10 years ago, I was quite attached to my uncle. From what I can remember, he could answer any question that I could ask him. As a child, what he said naturally sounded amazing to me, though I can't exactly remember anymore the things he told me. The image I have of my uncle is that there was nothing that he didn't know of." "Sounds like an amazing fellow." "Yeah, he was knowledgeable and eloquent, though I don't know if that's still true now." I smiled and replied half-jokingly, "Well, at least you knew he was when he was still around. I have 2 to 3 uncles myself, though none of them are missing. So, why are you asking a request of me? You're not expecting me to go to Malaysia to search for him, are you?" "No, my uncle was last seen in the Bengali region, in India, that is. What I wanted to request from Oreki-san is to help me remember what it was my uncle said to me." Chitana finished her sentence upon saying that, which seemed appropriate as I had no idea what she had just said. She's asking me to help her remember what her uncle told her? That's too ridiculous. I'm getting ahead of myself, aren't I? My memories related to my uncle come from my childhood, so I can't exactly remember them myself. But there's this one event that left a strong impression in my mind. I really want to recall that moment. As her lips were getting dry, Chitana took a sip of her cocoa. She then continued in a lower volume. "It was when I was still in kindergarten. For some reason, I managed to hear my uncle mention something about a classics club. I always thought this Jurassic Club had something to do with dinosaurs, so I became interested in this classics club of his." Jurassic Club, Classics Club, it was a silly pun, though kids that age usually pronounce things wrong. Maybe that's why. This must be when Chitanda ate the incarnation of curiosity itself, was born. I heard many stories about my uncle's classics club. Then, one day, I went looking for my uncle to ask him about something concerning the classics club. Normally, he would answer me as usual, but on that day, he seemed reluctant to answer. He began wringing his hands with this regretful look, and when he finally calmed down, he answered my question. Upon hearing his answer, What happened? I cried. Whether it was something fearful or sad, I cried out loud. My mother was so startled that she came to see what was going on, and that's all I could remember. The last thing I can recall is that my uncle didn't come to console me like he normally would. You were shocked? Yes, a bit, I believe. I remembered that day all this time. Afterwards, yes, sometime during junior high school, I began to be bothered by that event. Why did my uncle look so regretful? Why did he not console me? Oreki-san, what do you think? Upon being asked, I started to think. Why would a person who would so patiently answer every single question asked by a young kid leave her crying by herself at that moment? I quickly figured out the reason and explained with as much composure as I could muster. Your uncle told you something he could not take back. He didn't want to lie to a kid and probably wanted you to know that what he said was true. Chitana gasped and smiled. Yes, that's what I thought of as well, she said while looking straight at me. When's my coffee gonna come? Upon realizing that, I began to wonder in earnest just what it was that he had told me that day. So I began to take things into action, first by attempting to reenact the environment of that day. I sneaked into the residence of the Sekitanis, whom we have become estranged with. She's definitely the sort that would go to all lengths in order to get things done. I see. So that's what you meant by personal reasons when you said why you joined the Classics Club? Chitanda nodded. Yes. I wasn't aware that the Classics Club was nearly abolished until recently. I knew it wasn't easy, but I didn't expect that there would be no one left behind who would know the truth. I considered asking the teachers, but the teachers who were around when my uncle was a student 33 years ago were no longer at the school. So, why are you asking me? That's because... As Chitana stopped her sentence midway, the waiter arrived with my coffee. Working mechanically, the bearded waiter withdrew my empty cup and replaced it with a new one. After the waiter had left, Chitana sipped her cup of cocoa as though remembering everything, and said, During the incident with the clubroom key and the library mystery that Ibara-san raised, you managed to deduce their solutions in ways beyond my imagination. While it may be shameless to say this, I believe Oreki-san is the one who can figure out the answer to my question. I felt myself frowning. You overestimate me. I just relied on some insight, which required some luck in itself. Then I'm seeking help from this luck of yours? I don't think I can help you. The reason I didn't think I could help her was that, firstly, I had no obligation to assist her in such a bothersome errand. Secondly, if I couldn't figure out anything, then I would let Chitana down, as well as feel very helpless myself. This wasn't some quiz show, but merely Chitana's exaggerated way of finding out the meaning of a moment in her life. You expect an energy saver like me to bear such a responsibility? You must be kidding me. Why does it have to be me? Surely there are others who could help you. Chitana's eyes widened. Without knowing the meaning behind that, I continued. Wouldn't it be more efficient to rely on more people to help out? You could ask Satoshi, Ibara, or other friends of yours. There was no response. Chitana merely remained silent at my refusal. She lowered her head and slowly muttered, Oreki-san, I'm not the sort of person who could tell everyone about my past. I told anyone else about this story before. I was taken aback. I see. Now it makes sense. Why would Chitana purposely call me out on a Sunday just to talk to me alone? The answer was simple. She did not want many people to know about her uncle's story. Chitana had decided to put her trust in me, a person she barely knew, and yet I had told her to rely on more people. It would of course be embarrassing for many people to find out such private information. Who wouldn't have their own deepest secret that they want to cherish? I felt myself going red, and I lowered my head. I'm sorry. Seeing Chitanda smile at me, I felt like she had probably forgiven me. Silence then followed. Chitanda seemed to be waiting for me to speak. Yet, I couldn't find anything appropriate to say. The steam from my cup of coffee rose between us. Chitanda's Vienna cocoa had gone cold by now, as no steam came from her cup. I held my cup in my hands. As though to break the awkwardness, Chitanda said with a gentle expression, I've said something unreasonable. I know I've involved you in something I shouldn't, but yet Oreki-san, when you managed to solve my queries, you probably remind me a lot of my own. No offense to my uncle, but you too have managed to answer my questions. That's why... Oh no, I'm being too selfish here. You had 3 years of high school remaining, so you could take your time finding out. If you're still troubled, then I won't necessarily stand aside and not help. Chitanda slowly shook her head. I wish to remember what happened that day with my uncle before he dies. I wish to find out before his funeral why my uncle told me something that I could not take back, and what it was that he told me. Before he dies? A dead person would already be dead, while a missing person isn't exactly dead. No, wait. That's right. People who have gone missing are dead. It has been 7 years since my uncle, Sekitani Jun, has gone missing. In case you didn't know, people who have been missing for 7 years are declared legally dead. The Sekitani family has been informed of such by the Missing Persons Bureau and will be holding a funeral in due time. So I wish to settle my questions regarding my uncle before then. Chitanda sighed after informing me as such, and then turned her gaze outside the window. I followed her gaze as well, and saw only a generic street view. I took another sip of my coffee. It seemed Chitanda was done speaking. I began to think. There is a memory that needs to be remembered, and it was a memory worth remembering. This matter was hard to define according to my motto. For someone like me who was used to dodging crisis after crisis, I don't have many memories worth remembering myself. However, for Chitanda, she would seek to recollect any memories that she may have forgotten.